You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The New Stack Makers. I'm your host, Heather Joslin, Editor-in-Chief of The New Stack, and today we're going to talk about, surprise, AI. But this isn't going to be the kind of conversation you've heard before about AI. We're going to talk about the dangerous complexity that organizations are building into their stacks because of the AI boom and what they could be doing about it now to avoid headaches in the future. Our guest for this conversation is Raj Verma, CEO of SingleStore. Hi, Raj.
Hi, Heather. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Raj, can you tell us a little bit about SingleStore and what it does?
Yeah, SingleStore is, by the way, before I get there, lovely to be on this podcast. I've heard a few of your podcasts and been very impressed. So I was looking forward to today. So yeah, it should be a good conversation. SingleStore, we are a Silicon Valley-based database company. We've been around for over a decade now. Any good database, world-class database takes 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars to build. And that's what we've built. And SingleStore is a data platform where you can transact with high fidelity, which means that there is an indelible signature of a transaction. So it fulfills the OLTP side of the fence from a data perspective. So you can, transact with high fidelity and reason with data without moving data. And you can get single-digit millisecond query response times at petabyte scale with multi-model workloads. Simply put, multi-model workloads being structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data. And hence the name SingleStore. So hopefully it'll turn into a verb one day where when people are asked what is their data strategy that supports their AI strategy, the answer would be we just put it in SingleStore. So SingleStore, just takes away complexity, just ensures that there's simplicity because only simplicity scale, and without scale there is no AI. So that's been our vision, mission, and purpose behind SingleStore.
Excellent. Well, that's a good place for us to get started. We're in the middle of an AI boom. Organizations of all sizes are pouring resources into AI in some fashion, and whether it's they're building apps using AI, their developers are using coding assistants, what have you. But what are you seeing in terms of the changes that organizations, especially larger organizations, are making in their infrastructure because of AI?
Yeah, I'll back up the truck a little bit if you don't mind, Heather.
Sure.
And I would just say that most of the excitement around AI is more around consumer AI. And just be patient with me just for a little bit. What OpenAI has done, I very rarely search now. I ask OpenAI. I have this story about a dear friend of mine. She had inherited certain plants for her deceased husband, and she wanted to make sure that those plants are taken care of, and she did not have a clue about those plants. And she just pointed the camera to the plant on OpenAI, and it told her everything about the plant and the soil and the current condition and what she needed to do and where she could go buy it. That's just huge. That's orders of magnitude. It's a step function increase from what we were used to in the past. So a lot of excitement around that, right? Consumer AI, really good, right? Rightfully the right excitement. In enterprise AI, like search. You've been using search for how many years now? Probably 25. I've been using it for 25 years, right? When was the last time you really searched for something important in your enterprise? It was only probably 18 months ago that enterprise search really happened. So consumer search around for 25 years, enterprise search, really Glean and some of the other, technologies have enabled that. So there's a huge gap between consumer and enterprise. In enterprise AI, we use AI both in terms of code development and Copilot, and also use certain, agentic tech for us to do better contract querying, for our sales reps to be enabled, for us to have plays that we run in our go-to-market channel. All of that really good, right? However, less than 1% of enterprise data right now is used to generate enterprise AI. So the fact is, we are in the absolute infancy of enterprise AI, whereas consumer AI, we are probably, a toddler or just about walking or, whatever age that you might assign to that evolution in terms of consumer AI. Now, in enterprise AI, the reason of the complexity, if you were to take away, firstly, the data authorization and where the data resides and can the data be used externally, etc. I mean, all those conversations, I think people have found a way around them now. And by 2 years ago, it was just everything. Yeah. That was one of the reasons why it didn't really take off at all, almost. And people were kicking tires. Now, once you've sorted that out, the greater discussion right now is your AI strategy is only as good as your data strategy. So, yeah, you can have an agentic app here, there, and everywhere. However, if you really want to have a AI wrapper around your enterprise, your AI strategy is only as good as your data strategy, right? And when I say data strategy, the entire data governance, security, all the rest of it is within that data strategy, right? Where we get involved is you can't have 130 islands of data, all right, trying to have various contexts being in each of those islands and then be able to support a robust AI strategy, right? So I think the consolidation of data estates and context within an organization is where we come into play. And that's the hard problem, right? Now, where we are seeing the adoption of AI as, call it the version one of enterprise AI adoption, is in SaaS companies, all right? So the three-tier SaaS architecture, which is databases, agentic tech, and Copilot, is actually in some way, shape, or form really coming to fruition right now, right?
Yeah.
Now, those AI applications on SaaS sort of technologies is relatively easier because it's a vertical integration. It's not that much horizontal, right? So we've seen a lot of the SaaS companies, a lot of our customers who have used us to transition from the old way of SaaS to the new way of SaaS, and that's where we've seen the maximum adoption thus far. In larger enterprises, large banks and large utilities or technology or media companies, you also got to understand a bank or a utility company is also sort of bringing together of 50, 60 different SaaS applications, right? So those applications which are relatively vertically integrated, all right, are applications which are easier to apply agentic tech to, and which is kind of quote unquote AI, right? Um, I don't quite think agentic tech is, I mean, of course, it's AI, but it's not, it's the first step of AI. So, what you're really doing is humans have fatigue. The famous example, the one thing that you could do to ensure that your diagnosis around a colonoscopy are right is to have your colonoscopy at 9 a.m. I mean, there's no other factor because by the time it's 4 p.m., the doctor is fatigued and he might miss something. All right.
Right.
Yeah, whereas with an agent, you don't have that. So I think automating tasks with agents is the first phase of AI, and we do see that happening right now, right? And I believe as I've always said, AI is going to come at us in three phases. The easy is going to get automated, the hard is going to become easy, and the impossible will become possible. So we are seeing the easy getting automated aspect of it, and we are probably 10% of our journey where the hard is becoming easy. But as we go and get into what is to me the most interesting part, which is impossible becoming possible, that I believe is about, well, I've always been wrong about the speed of AI catching up. I do think it's about 3 years away.
Oh, wow. It does seem to be moving quickly. It does. What as you see organizations, they're jumping into this. Do you think? I mean, do you think, for example, that because every person in leadership in an organization is also a consumer of consumer AI? Do you think there's a sense of, well, this should, because it's easy for me as a consumer, then it stands to reason that we should be. Is there maybe overconfidence in a sense, that for these organizations that are building this building this infrastructure for AI?
I think if I'll try and answer your questions in two different ways. One is enterprise search. It almost took a couple of decades for the enterprises to
Right.
catch up with consumer search. Yeah, and I don't think enterprise AI will take 2 decades to catch up, and there's a reason why. I do fundamentally believe that consumer AI has changed our perception of what customer experience is. What search did is made our lives easier. I mean, I need to buy flowers, on Valentine's Day. I searched the nearest florist and, got on the website and I ordered it. So it made my life easier. However, the experience of flower deliveries weren't that much better. You know what I mean? Yeah, sure, better than me having to go there, but it was just, e-commerce, right, at the end of the day, and me finding that consumer. So yeah, life became better, but the experience was not, off the charts better. I could point to a plant and find out everything about the plant. Consumer AI is training the consumers to seek and demand a certain experience from their service providers, be it a bank, a utility, telecommunication provider, or what have you, right? And I think that demand from the consumer base, that I will go to someone who provides me a congruent experience to my personal life, is something that will happen and will happen very, very quickly. And I think that is the biggest driver. And by the way, I always say that I'm in the back nine of my life, right? And the kids who are just on the practice tee, so as to speak, right now, have a very different demand of the experience from their retailers, from their service providers. And I think that is a bigger driver for organizations not to be left behind with AI rather than anything else, in my humble opinion. And I'll illustrate it with one other example, which may or may not be valid. I'm going to Japan tomorrow. We are announcing our Japanese entity, and on Monday, or maybe it's Tuesday. And the fact is, I was speaking to one of the esteemed AI leaders in Japan, representing a large organization, consulting organization, and he said something to me. He says, "Look, for whatever 50, 60 years, Japan's always been a country where everything was different. It was only 20 years ago, your mobile phones didn't work there. So you had to go take the CDN mobile phones from the airport. And I remember doing business that way.
Oh, yeah. I remember that too.
Yeah, you too, right? And the fact is that every time we had a data conversation with Japan, Japan was said, no, well, we are very different, right? Our folk don't have a problem standing in line. In fact, it's a cultural thing. They'll stand in line at a retail bank. The first time in probably decades, I saw a line at a retail bank because I was in Japan. They still stand in line. However, the enterprises there have said that because of OpenAI, our Japanese customers are going to demand that experience of us a lot sooner than they have ever done in the past. So the number of conversations that I've had with Japanese organizations talking about AI and how they need to jump at AI at a breakneck speed has been very refreshing for me. And again, they are, very, very planned, highest respect for that country and the way they approach problems. And they're like, yes, we do need to do the heavy lifting of getting a data strategy that we've sort of quote unquote not modernized for some years, if not decades. And we've got to attack that problem. And that's one of the reasons we are so excited about Japan. So the point I make is, I think this will be a universal movement. This will not be a, sort of developed countries or the 5, 10 economies in the world problem. I think it will be a universal experience augmentation, which the enterprises would have to answer for or be left behind.
Speaking of, these organizations jumping into this, and not just Japan, but in Japan, but globally, what are some of the dangers or potential dangers you're already seeing in the way they're creating this infrastructure for AI?
I do think that we haven't yet seen a blow up in enterprise or anecdotes because it's in its infancy. I mean, because the baby isn't running that fast, the fall is not that hard, right? So we are still in its infancy. I do think that data governance and data security will be heightened now.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that that will be huge, and that's why you're seeing companies do so well in that space. And the other bit, which is I think the reality is dawning on enterprises, because that's the conversation I'm beginning to have with most of them now, is the concurrency requirement on an application. How many people could actually go and log into your retail bank's website in a day? 10,000, 100,000, half a million at best, right? Um, 5 million. All right, no problem. All right. With agentic apps, all right, you might actually have 50 million hits on your website or on your application or on your database. So the level of concurrency that is required, hence performance that is required from your data layer, is orders of magnitude different as you prepare for the AI era than it was for the pre AI era. And I do think that a lot of the underlying data platforms that exist today in enterprise are just not ready for it. And it's not because they're bad, it's just they weren't built for that era, right? So it's just, you know, Hummer was not built for the electric era, right? And now, of course, there's an electric one. But I think that is the potential danger of sort of undersizing your data estates for the potential AI explosion and the realities and the core tenets of the new AI era, which will have volumes which are just unprecedented.
What might be some of the ways with this complexity, this perhaps undersized data infrastructure, pre maybe cloud native but not AI native infrastructure, for example, databases. What might be some of the ways an organization can minimize the complexity or streamline the complexity or just prepare themselves for this?
Yeah, I have always, I mean, at least for the last year or so, I've used the analogy of commercial real estate, which is, you have a lot of brown commercial real estates, which are old offices, which don't even have networking and all the rest of it. And then there are green, commercial office spaces, which have, a jogging track on the rooftop and a great cafeteria and Wi-Fi, which is high speed and, it's carbon neutral, all the rest of it. Now, the pricing of that green real estate is, and it's, by the way, flying off the shelf, so as to speak, whereas the brown data estates are just done. No one's ever renting them, unless they are completely modernized, almost gutted and then rebuilt. Now, the same thing will happen to the data estate. What happened to the commercial, real estate to the data estate? You will have to almost not burn down, but take down your brown data estates and convert all of them to green, so as to speak, to be able to take advantage of AI. And what is a green data real estate? It is a performant data estate. It is at scale, and it is, you can't have swim lane databases, one for structured, one for unstructured, one for semi-structured, one for time series, one for vector, one, it just doesn't scale that way. So you would just need a consolidated data state, which is very, very performant for your enterprise AI needs. And that is what's very, very exciting for SingleStore here, because that is exactly what we were built for. And that's why we feel that the best days of SingleStore are ahead of us.
I want to talk a little bit about SingleStore's approach, but have you seen any best practices or examples of organizations building AI infrastructure in a smart way for this new AI world?
Yes, we have. One of our largest customers, a leading global bank, a large electronics company down the road from us. I think those are the two examples which stand out for me. And it was actually the realization that the enterprise AI architecture will have to be based on first principles rather than to see it as a legacy modernization project. All right. And by the way, there's a subtle difference between those two. One is managing your assets, the other is, if we had none of that, what would we do? And then the next step is, well, we don't, but we have this. How does this evolve into this? And how quickly does that happen? And how quickly can you sort of get rid of the holy cows and say, yeah, this served us brilliantly, and it has never failed us, and it's a dear, dear component of our previous stack, but it has no room in our next stack, right? And as I've always said, all of us have had this experience, or at least most of us have had this experience, where you look at an employee and you're like, you've been brilliant for the last many, many years for us, but the direction that we are taking, I don't think you fit in, right? So you almost have to find the next way forward, and that's very tough, both emotionally and convincing the business stakeholders to take that risk of bringing down or potentially bringing down an application just for the betterment of tomorrow. Those are hard decisions. And uh, and I think at the end of the day, the organization which gets that right, and I, by the way, don't have the answers to it, or at least not all the answers to it, is going to be the one that leaves the others behind in the dust.
And just to wrap up, just a little bit about what do you feel? You mentioned that SingleStore is not a swim lane, does not have a swim lane approach to data. It's one. What are the ways in which it's how is SingleStore especially suited for this new AI world we're currently living in, the new AI first, AI forward organization?
Yeah, look, serendipitously, we did not know AI when we started building it. Because what we actually, the basic building tenets for us were that the world ahead of us, and I'm talking about almost a decade ago, is going to be, and we were not really preparing for the intelligence economy, but I think we were more preparing for the service economy, which was always on 24/7, where speed at scale mattered. And for us, it was easier to make a database that was designed for the service economy to evolve into a database that was designed for the intelligence economy. And I think this is a very important part here, because if you were to have a database that's designed for the intelligence economy, right, You're talking about someone who saw the intelligence economy coming at you 10 years ago and built for that. And by the way, I know no one saw that.
Yeah.
And the fact is, if someone now has to go back and say, I'm going to build a database for the intelligence economy, you can. It's going to be $500 million in 10 years to build it.
Yeah.
All right. And by the way, the database business is, OpenAI is sexy, and Perplexity is sexy, and Anthropic is sexy, and all the rest of those organizations are kind of sexy. Database is not sexy. It's hard work. It's deep math. It's just so want to build it and then to harden it. You have to have enterprises using you for multiple years to see what the deficiencies are in your organization and then be able to hone that for enterprise grade.
Yeah, you need that feedback loop.
But it's feedback loop. It's
Yeah.
relatively easy to build an application that I can design my daughter's water polo schedule on, right? And then shut it down in 3 months. And that has its own usage. To evolve that database into an enterprise class AI database, 10 years. 10 years, right? For us to evolve from a service economy to an intelligent economy database, which essentially meant you had to have vectors. We've had vectors for 8 years now, all right? Because we were doing predictive AI prior to that. Full text search, hybrid search, right? JSON, BSON, sort of data adaptations. So we have, in the last 2.5 years, been able to augment our database, like so many others have, from something that was built for the service economy into something that is very suited for the intelligence economy at scale and with enterprise grade architecture. So I do believe performance would be key, and how nicely you play with the AI ecosystem, and how easy it is for the developers to be able to consume your application. Those would be the three tenets for the next database that the world would sort of adopt with a lot of gusto.
Excellent. Well, and that sounds like a good place to stop for today. I want to thank today's guest, Raj Verma of SingleStore, for joining me today. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for joining us for today's conversation. This has been Heather Joslin for the New Stack Makers, and we'll see you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.